Well, the
Recording in
webinar just
progress.
started, but
People can
he's
trickle
gonna.
in now. Hey, everybody.
And
Hello.
there's people here. Hello. Can't see you, but you can see me.
Exactly. Brennan, are you going to give us a cue to get started?
Yeah, we've got about 7 people in here right now. Hey, Benny. Hey, Brent, Jill, Joel, Zach, Zanik, Lexi. Thanks for joining.
All right. Well, let's do it. Aaron, it's good to be hanging out with you again.
Yeah, good to see you, Rakesh.
Got about
Yeah.
7 people
Last time
in here
was
right now.
in person at the Online
Hey,
News
Benny. Hey,
Association
Brent.
conference in Los Angeles, and we actually had hung out with ASIN for dinner the night before, which was cool.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's great. I'm looking forward to kind of getting an update from you on how things have been going.
Sure.
Getting started here, I don't want to assume that everybody knows who you are, though I feel like everybody knows who you are. And also I'm interested in how you describe yourself today, but like,
Sure.
who is Aaron Rupar? What do you do?
Yeah, these days I think of myself as being more of a publisher than like a reporter or a writer. I still do some writing for my newsletter, Public Notice, where I cover politics and media. And I think most people probably got to know me through my work at Vox. I was at Vox for 3 years from 2018 through late 21 and decided to go independent. And I'm now doing a newsletter where, I'm publishing 4 times a week. And usually I'm writing 1 or 2 of the newsletters, but then I have a really fantastic group of contributors who helps me out. A couple writers who are experts on legal affairs, which these days, if you're covering politics, you feel like you kind of have to take a law school class or 2 to make sense of what's going on in our politics. And so that's really helpful because that's not an area where I have a ton of expertise. And I've got some people doing Q&As for me and all sorts of different, interesting content for the newsletter. And so I launched Public Notice a little over 2 years ago now. I'm up just near 70,000 total subscribers. I should hit that any day now. So it's growing kind of beyond my expectations. And, one of the reasons that I was able to go independent, really make it, a successful business operation was because of the audience that I built posting video clips, which kind of brings us to this seminar and, my relationship over the years with SnapStream and with Rakesh. And, it's been really, hopefully mutually beneficial, but very beneficial on my end, just in terms of growing an audience on social media and then eventually, tapping into that to start my own business. And so, maybe that's a good place to kind of wrap up the biographical stuff. But
Yeah.
News clips have been a key part of the journalism I've been doing going back now to the fall of 2017 when I kind of stumbled into it because I had no training on video. I was an editor at the time when I started posting video clips at Think Progress, and that was, posting video was something I could do from the newsroom. At that time, I was editing a group of reporters that were doing a lot of traveling. They traveled to campaign events or, political events all over the country. And I was kind of the point of contact back in the newsroom. And I actually covered the 2016 campaign in a similar type of role as kind of the newsroom Trump person who was writing about the Trump speeches and things like that. At that time, I had no training on video. I was watching a lot of these rallies, but I didn't have the expertise or the tools to post video. And the difference between kind of toiling in obscurity in 2016 to a couple of years later, once I figured out how to tap into posting video and the appetite that people had for that, was night and day and really helped me kind of build my career because everything that kind of came after that, I don't think would have happened had I not started doing video work on social media.
So going back to, you said, that you nowadays describe yourself, I think you said more as a publisher versus a writer. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
And that, I think that was very different when you and I spoke in Los Angeles at the Online News Association. I think you were, in fact, we talked about burnout and how you do this as a one man show. So like, take me through the process of, of hiring these other writers, contributors, and, shifting into this mode where, now you're not just a one person operation, right? And you also have these specialists. Because I think that's really interesting. That's like, you've scaled this thing effectively.
Yeah, it was really an organic process that began when my son was born in May of last year. Because at that time we had a newborn and we had a 2-year-old. She had just turned 2. And so, I needed to take a little bit of time, as any new parent does, just to kind of spend time with your kid. And, those first few weeks when you have a newborn, it's obviously very key to spend family time. And so as I did that, my first thought originally was that I would kind of like step in and write, maybe like a newsletter a week, just kind of keep the thing going. Because of course, like when you have a real job, you can take parental leave, but I couldn't do that with a newsletter, and it's a little bit out of sight, out of mind, where, sure, I could hit pause on everybody's subscriptions for 6 weeks or something like that, but then you have no income. Like, that's kind of a tough place to be. And at that time I was still on a deal with Substack where they paid me in advance to go independent. And so it would have involved also pausing the advance that I was getting. So it just wasn't going to make financial sense. And so I put out a call on Twitter, just, asking for, especially, I think I specified that if we were mutuals on Twitter and you were a freelance journalist, I was looking to hire people to kind of help me write some newsletters while I was taking a break. And I stumbled into, some really lasting relationships. Noah Berlatsky is a guy who covers politics for me, who I got to know through just putting out a call on Twitter. And, he wrote just today for the newsletter a really good recap of last night's elections and kind of putting it into context of how that can kind of affect our expectations for next year and what it says about Biden's chances of being reelected and things like that. And so he writes really smart kind of explainers on politics. And I got to know him in that time period where he started writing for me. And then it kind of became just like a virtuous circle where this woman, Lisa Needham, who writes for me, she's a lawyer who writes about legal affairs. I had known her. She lives in Minneapolis, and I knew her going back, many, many years just on social media. I'd met her one time at a concert, actually. But as she saw that I was publishing other writers, emailed me and was kind of like, hey, I would love to write for you if you think it would be a good fit. And she's fantastic. So nowadays it's basically a cadre of about 4 writers who on a weekly basis are contributing. And so if anything, I usually have more content than I can publish, which is a good problem to have. And, it just kind of made sense because, the people who are writing for me do really fantastic work. Their voice kind of fits with, sort of the liberal coverage I've been doing for many, many years, where ideologically we're kind of approaching things, not always an identical way, but enough where it's kind of consistent, so people who like my writing are going to enjoy the stuff that they're doing. And it just kind of helped me have a little bit better of a work-life balance because, one of the things when I launched the newsletter, I was writing every edition, as you kind of alluded to, for, I think it was like 8 months from when I launched in October of 21 until May of 22, basically. And one of the things I was noticing was that it was such a grind just to write that much on a daily basis that it was really affecting my ability to stay on top of the news. Where like there'd be news stories breaking that I'd be in the middle of writing something for the newsletter the next day. And so it felt like it was becoming increasingly difficult to kind of go deep on topics or have the sort of depth of coverage that I really wanted to have in the newsletter. And so, it kind of made sense on every level where it took a little bit of work off my plate, but I think the content ends up overall being a better product because of it. And it also kind of frees me up to do some of the social media work. That's kind of the bread and butter of how I grow my audience, posting videos, doing big threads on political events, hopefully getting people in the door of following me on social media. And then eventually, if they like what I'm doing there, getting them to subscribe to the newsletter. So yeah, there wasn't any kind of grand design. I mean, when I went independent, I very much planned it to be my own publication and for me to be the main writer, which I still am to a point, but it just made sense, as I got into running a business, and I've noticed this with other people on Substack too, where, it seems like you kind of reach a point where it starts to make more sense to bring in other people to help you, whether that's editors, I have an editor that I work with too, or writers. So yeah, there was no grand design, but that has actually, now that you mentioned it, from September of last year when you and I did the panel in LA to now, that has been a big change. So, and it's been a healthy one.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if I convert what you just told us into a playbook, step one is have a large Twitter following so that you can put a call out and attract get visibility for that. Number two is have a second child. Necessity is the mother of invention. And then it sounds like it was very organic. It sounds like this was not something that you were like working hard to climb a hill. You just sort of like slid into this new mode of existence. Right? I mean, that's what I'm getting from what you're describing. That's really cool.
And I'm not sure if the people who are in the audience, how many people come from the aspect of being curious about journalism and independent journalism. But one thing that I do think kind of an important thing that, at least for me, when I talk to people who are considering going independent, who are journalists, either freelancers or if they write for a larger publication, for me, it wouldn't have been possible without the scale that I had. Because I think when I went independent, it was something on the lines of like 800,000 Twitter followers. And so when you start to kind of do the math on that, it's like, well, if I can even convert like 1% of that into newsletter subscribers, it starts to make sense. But there's so many good journalists, who are doing fantastic work, who maybe, have 20,000 followers or something like that. And it just becomes hard to attract like the subscriber base that you need to make it work financially, unless you're doing really niche coverage. Like if you're like a writer on tech or finance, crypto, that sort of thing, where, people will seek out your work even if they're maybe not on social media. There's exceptions to that, but I'm doing the type of publication that I'm doing, which is sort of covering politics very broadly, covering media, but I'm not like a specialist in any one area necessarily, maybe with the exception of like covering Trump, I would say. But that's the reason that it made sense for me in a way that I think for a lot of other people, it wouldn't. And again, I wouldn't have had that following in the first place if it hadn't been for the video work that I do, which kind of allowed me to grow exponentially through the Trump years and gave me a good base to work with.
Yeah, I mean, to put it in marketing, terms, it's Twitter is the top of your funnel. The subscriber conversion happens, off of Twitter via Substack, but you really couldn't drive those conversions if you didn't have that flywheel of audience on Twitter that is also probably constantly growing to then push people down the funnel into becoming subscribers. What does churn look like in your newsletter? I'm curious. We run at SnapStream, we run a recurring revenue business, and so churn is something that we look at really closely. And who are the people that are churning, and from having been paying customers to not being customers, and then understand what was the reason that they churned. Have you ever formally, informally looked at that anecdotally? Do you have a sense of what that looks like for your subscriber base?
I look at it not with a ton of intention behind it. I mean, that stuff kind of gets pushed into your dashboard. I have confidence that I'm doing good work and that the product is good. And as long as I'm in that mindset, I'm not really sweating the churn that much, because it's going to, when you have 70,000 subscribers on a daily basis, there are people where, their credit card changes, like they cancel a credit card. And you could go to the length, and I have known Substack writers who have done this, of like actually contacting people, because you can usually tell if it's someone. They give you in the Substack dashboard an indication of how active people are, like if they're opening your emails, and they boil this down into a star rating, where it's like if someone has a 5-star next to their name, that means that they're highly engaged, they're opening the emails, they might even be commenting, on the website, those sorts of things. So you could, if you wanted to, if you saw someone like that where, their credit card didn't, it was a failed transaction on their credit card. You could, in theory, reach out to them and kind of remind them like, hey, your subscription lapsed. I don't do that. I just, I've assumed that at some point they'll figure that out and resubscribe. I also, most of the content in the newsletter is free. I do 4 editions a week, and usually one of them is paywalled. Sometimes it depends, if it's my own writing, I'm much more comfortable paywalling that than I am with the contributors, because I kind of feel like with the contributors, they want to get their work out there. So, it varies from week to week a little bit, but so I do paywall at least one thing a week, which is an incentive, for people to sign up. If they like what we're doing on a daily basis, then, hey, sign up. You can get all of the content. And then also I do Q&As. People can, leave comments on the website if they're a paid subscriber, that sort of thing. So there are perks along the way too. But I haven't looked at the churn numbers specifically enough to cite, X percentage is churning on a monthly basis. But I do know, you can follow on a daily basis the revenue and the subscribers. And that was actually something early on that, when I had a week or a few days where the numbers would dip, you kind of get that irrational thought of like, oh man, did I lose my touch? Like maybe this is it, I've already hit the peak and it's over kind of thing. And then invariably like, the next week will be better. And so things ebb and flow, but that can be, running an independent, being an independent journalist and running a business, that can be kind of a blow, when you have a slow week or something happens where your revenue dips and you start to kind of question yourself. But I've been at it long enough now where you just kind of understand that that's sort of baked into doing this.
Yeah. There's the jetsam and flotsam of subscribers, and you'll see some bumps and some decreases, but not to get worried, I suppose. Has the Substack ecosystem gotten more sophisticated? I mean, by ecosystem, I mean, are there within Substack or outside of Substack, are there more resources for independent journalists like you? Like, is there like a group that you're a part of where you chat with other people that are running Substacks? And, you mentioned you have an editor. Are there people that, hang out to be editors to Substack writers, right? I know early on, part of that advance was to give you, the startup capital to get off the ground. Some of that is just, the support that you need to run, a media product like you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do talk with other Substack writers very regularly. It's kind of on an informal basis. Like we don't have, kind of like a regular meeting or anything like that. Substack, so the editor they have right now, and every editor that I've had at Substack, which has been 3 or 4, has been kind of arranged through Substack in the sense that they have a pool of people, who are specialists, like in my case, politics, or some again are doing like finance or tech sort of thing, and they will kind of make that intro at least. These days, they don't subsidize anything for me, so it's money that's coming out of my own pocket. But my editor, Steve, who I've been working with now for quite a while, it's been over a year. It's a good relationship in that he's a freelance editor, so he's flexible to kind of pick up pieces here and there when need be. More broadly, I mean, there was definitely kind of peak Substack. I think it was probably about like 18 months to 2 years ago, where it felt like a lot of people were taking the plunge of going from working for an outlet to going independent. I feel like that peak has passed a little bit. And I don't have, kind of great reasons for why that is. It might just be kind of oversaturation where, even in my own case, like I'm a paying subscriber to probably like 20 Substacks. And like, it definitely adds up, when it's $5, 20 different ways every month. I'm happy to support people, and, a lot of the publications that I subscribe to, I get a lot of value out of them and I read them regularly. But there is kind of that, back in the day, maybe you subscribed to 2 newspapers or maybe 3, but now you could easily subscribe to 20 Substacks and then 10 publications on top of that. And it definitely adds up. So that could be part of it, where I see less people kind of taking that plunge. Now, on the other hand, there are fewer and fewer journalism jobs. And so I think it's just become kind of tough on every level. But again, I think it's hard for people to go independent these days unless you have, a big audience that you can tap into. And now, social media is becoming very fractured, where like, there's a lot of people who have already kind of quit Twitter altogether, and maybe they're on Threads, or maybe they're on Mastodon. And so it's become kind of siloed in that way too, which I think makes it a little more challenging, just to know where to build an audience or how to tap into them. I've been lucky in that I'm already up to, I'm closing in 150,000 followers on Threads. And I've noticed that Threads has a very engaged audience, where, I'll post something and routinely there'll be dozens and dozens of comments, maybe over 1,000 likes on there. And so clearly, I think part of it is because people have signed up very recently because it's a new platform. People are quite engaged on there. So those are kind of the 2 that I'm spending a lot of time on, are Threads and still on Twitter. But I do think kind of the siloing, makes it maybe a little more challenging, because now instead of, posting just a tweet kind of marketing what you're doing on Substack, it's like, well, like for me, when I publish a newsletter, I have a routine now in the morning where, show way that their thumbnails display where the headline is like on the image. And so if you're publishing something on Substack and you share it on Twitter, you can still see the headline. It's like text that they superimpose on the banner image for the piece. which was great, like because that whole thing with Twitter was really a pain where it was like you had to add all of this text to your tweets to give people a sense of what they're clicking on. And now with the headline displays on the image, they've kind of worked around that, and they were very proactive in doing that. And so, just kind of my little plug for Substack. I have no financial relationship with them at all beyond being a writer on their platform, but they've been great to work with, and they seem very on top of trying to anticipate where social media is going and how they can kind of best fit in with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Bunch of topics here that I want to jump in on. So, or go deeper on. Let's talk about Twitter first. So, tell me from your vantage point, what's been happening with Twitter? Have your numbers gone down in terms of, the clicks that you get from Twitter? How have the conversations changed? What is I have my viewpoint, but like from your vantage point, how has Twitter changed in the last couple of months as we've seen them make more and more changes?
Yeah, in terms of the numbers, it's been kind of a roller coaster in the sense that it seems like Elon is in this pattern where every month or so he'll either say something really outrageous or roll out some new change to the platform that people really don't like. And so I've noticed like my numbers will tick up, and then Elon will do something where people quit, like they're done with Twitter again. And so now it's kind of on the upswing again, where I've been kind of just below 900,000 for like a long time, over a year. But it's been down in like the 870s when there's been cycles where people quit. And so, their engagement numbers are completely wrecked in that, it used to be really interesting with video clips to track what the views were, and like if you hit 1 million views on a clip, that was like, wow, a lot of people watch this clip. Well, now they calculate the view numbers, not in terms of people actually watching a video, but just in terms of who scrolls past your tweet. Sure. And so, like I posted a kind of a nothing clip last night from Newsmax where Rick Santorum was on there kind of having a mini meltdown over the election results. And I posted a clip of this, and I was shocked this morning to see that it had something like 4 million views, which is not, it's not an accurate proxy for how many people are actually watching the video. So you kind of have to take those numbers now with a grain of salt. I mean, you probably remember that Trump did an interview with Tucker Carlson that was counter programming. I believe it was the first GOP debate. And Trump had a number of posts on Truth Social talking about how this was the most watched interview of all time because it did something like, it was like 60 million views, but he was comparing this with like the Super Bowl and all of these other like, legendary events in television history where it's just not an apples to apples comparison. So that's been kind of unfortunate. The quality of conversations component, I mean, I definitely think it's very much deteriorated from where it was at 2 years ago. However, I've kind of set up my little universe there where I only get notifications if I'm following someone, basically. So I don't see a lot of the worst of the worst. I'm just not seeing it. Like I'm not drilling down into my mentions to see that stuff. But you definitely can see that people, like some of the worst actors, are feeling kind of emboldened where the enforcement of content moderation has really been weakened, and you can just get away with a lot more. Especially in this context, I mean, I've really noticed it sadly in the Israel Hamas war that's going on, where especially with disinformation in that context, where the incentive structure that was created, where you can only monetize your content on Twitter if you're verified, but then it also only monetizes the impressions from verified accounts. But he created this incentive where you would have these accounts kind of deliberately, in some cases, spreading misinformation, videos that were from other conflict zones years ago, and then repackaged, as a video of something that was happening in Gaza. And then, of course, Elon had to change that. He announced that if a tweet is corrected by community notes, basically fact checked by the Twitter community, it's immediately demonetized, which is, a sensible change, I suppose. But it's gotten really, I remember when Twitter used to be for breaking news, like the place to be, where you get like the freshest clips, on the ground reporting, that sort of thing. And especially for using the search function these days, it's kind of useless. Like you can't, if it's not an account that you're familiar with, there's no way to know if it's if there's any credibility behind what you're seeing or not. And so I've had to kind of change the way that I use it to account for those changes. And so I still think in terms of like the overall functionality and, it still in a lot of ways is the best platform. Especially in my world, like doing video clips, the integration that SnapStream has with Twitter, where you can post a video from the SnapStream page, just hitting a button. You don't have to do like a cumbersome download and then upload process. There still are many respects in which it is the best platform. And I still think you have the widest range ideologically on Twitter, where if you're interested in what conservatives are saying about something, there aren't a lot of conservatives on Threads, at least that I've seen. Certainly if you go on like Blue Sky or Mastodon, I mean, they're very liberal places. So because I cover people on the right, it still feels worthwhile to spend time there to have a sense of what people on the right are saying about news events. Especially with like the debate tonight, which I'll be covering and posting videos. Like I want to see what actual Republicans are saying about it. And so, I don't want to like completely trash on it, but I mean, it's certainly gotten worse. And again, I will say it's a little bit of an upswing right now where Elon's he hasn't done anything outrageous in a couple of weeks. And so people seem to be kind of coming back or reactivating their accounts, but
Right.
he will soon do something that causes people to say like, I'm done again.
I'm out of here. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're describing is, sort of a love-hate relationship. People have an on and off relationship right now with Twitter, and that tracks. I think that I've been on Twitter pretty much since it was started, and it's been occasionally painful to see all of these changes happening. Really basic functional changes like breaking the way links are presented. On Twitter are a good example of that. So that's been sad to see, but I'm still on Twitter, right? Like, but definitely have a different perception of it than I did before. So with Threads, have you followed like what they've talked about as far as news goes? Like they're sort of they've made comments that they don't want to make Threads a news platform, but they're not for news, they're not against news, right? Have you followed any of that by any chance?
Yeah, I did track that. Yeah, I mean that was right when Threads was rolling out over the summer. One of the, and I can't remember exactly who it was with Threads who had that quote basically saying like they don't view themselves as being a news platform, and it's just kind of another type of content on the platform.
I heard. By the way, I heard it
Yeah.
repeated recently, like just recently.
Okay.
I heard that kind of same point repeated. But they also said, look, we're not running away from news. It's just that we don't intend to build for news specifically. And they talked about polarization. They said, we want for Threads to be a place where we can have civil conversations. And so, that was actually the reason that I think I read for avoiding news as a specific target.
Yeah, and I haven't really noticed that in practice. Like I was saying, I mean, I post pretty much exclusively news content on there, and the engagement numbers are really high. And my following is growing like way faster than I would have thought on there. And that could be, I figured out some workarounds right away in terms of like, it was really difficult at first to post video because they had no desktop version. So I had to use this process of, cutting a clip and then airdropping it from my computer to my phone and then posting it from my phone, which I got pretty quick at doing because, it's really not that complex. There's just a few steps involved, but that was what you had to do because there was no desktop version. Now they do have a desktop version that's more functional. And so you still have to use kind of this cumbersome process of downloading, dragging it to your desktop and then uploading into Threads. So, hopefully someday, if you guys ever develop an integration with Threads, that would be really helpful because the one that you have for Twitter is great. But I haven't really noticed, like I said, I mean, it seems like there's a pretty thriving community for people talking news on there. I mean, a lot of the same journalists that I'm in touch with on a daily basis on Twitter or on Threads. I mean, some have quit Twitter and are on Threads. And I don't get the sense that their content's being throttled. I mean, I mainly use the following tab on Threads, but they do have a For You algorithmic feed, and it's a lot of news content. So I think, maybe behind the scenes, there was maybe some recalibration because, I noticed at first the For You on Threads was a lot of like influencers and kind of like products, more kind of Instagram style content. But now, when I pull up the For You on there, I mean, it seems pretty similar to what I'm seeing on Twitter in terms of being very news heavy and journalism heavy. And so I wonder about that. I don't have any inside info. And I can't necessarily speak to everything that they're saying publicly, but I will say just as a user, it seems like a pretty healthy environment for conversations surrounding news.
That's awesome. And tell me about the others, like Mastodon, Blue Sky. What are those universes look like from your vantage point?
So I do get a little bit I don't know if frustrated is the right word, but it's kind of I guess I'll go with frustrated for this because there have been a lot of people with Blue Sky specifically saying like it's like the early days of Twitter and trying to get people, and I'm on there and I use it, but they have no video whatsoever. So if you're a multimedia journalist kind of doing news clips or any sort of multimedia, like it's not really a place for you to spread your work. I mean, I share my newsletters on there. I kind of use it, to make like, there's a lot of jokes and kind of like, it's more of like, what's the term? Irreverent maybe is the right word. People cracking jokes and being wise guys on Blue Sky, and it's kind of fun in that way, but it isn't really a home for my work because you can't post video. Yeah. So that's a big limitation, and I hope that someday they roll out more features and functionality, but I don't know when that will be. Mastodon actually has pretty good video integration, but it's a very niche environment because even to get up and running with a Mastodon account takes a certain degree of technical expertise because you have to choose a server to be on.
Right.
And then depending what server you're on, it can be difficult to follow people on other servers. There's really an impersonation problem because they don't have any sort of verification that I've seen. So even in my case, there are like 3 or 4 accounts impersonating me on there. And so how do you really kind of break through all of that noise on there? Right. So I pretty much only use it to share my newsletters at this point. Like I'm not really spending a lot of time on Mastodon. And then Post News is the other one. Like Post News has tried really hard. I'm part of their creator program. They have like 15 journalists who are part of that, where they're really trying to incentivize people. Their model is almost like Substack, only instead of recurring revenue, they have more of like a tip-based thing where you can paywall content, people can tip you. And it is pretty, it has its place kind of in the ecosystem, but it's much more blog style. So, you'll see people like Dan Rather is a really active person on Post News. And he posts these kind of like daily reflections, almost like diary entries, and they're really good. But it's not, if you're doing kind of quips about the news or breaking news, or let's do a thread about the debate, like it's not really a place for that. It's more of a place like if you put together a supercut highlight video of the debate that's 10 minutes long. They do have native video there too. So you could do that. You could paywall it, all these, so they do have a lot of interesting functionality there. But for me and the type of coverage that I do, definitely Thread seems like the most promising of the new ones. And then I spend time on Twitter as well. Substack Notes is great. Again, no video there also. So
I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
so
everybody,
Substack Notes is really
producer
good.
Brennan coming over the intercom here. We have a quick question from Elijah Freshie to Aaron. Blue Sky is in that pool too. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I was just talking about that, how they don't have video. So that's really limiting for me in terms of I can't post video clips or do threads. The community there is very engaged and very entertaining. Like there's just, I really enjoy reading my feed on Blue Sky. And so I do spend a little bit of time there, but for the purposes of our conversation surrounding like video clips and the type of work that I do, to put food on the table, it doesn't really enable that. And so when I see people really kind of hyping up Blue Sky, like, this is what's going to replace Twitter, it's the best of the new platforms. It's like, until they have video capabilities for me, that's going to be a limit on how much time I spend there and how much effort I make to build an audience there.
If you had to, make a prediction, what would you say this landscape looks like in 3 years from now?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, I feel like Threads is here to stay for sure. Man, if I had to make kind of a bold take, I would say that, I think Threads will siphon off a lot of the people kind of like yourself, myself, who are, kind of moderate or a little bit left, because I feel like, Elon's really angling to make Twitter more of like a comfortable place for right wingers. And, with just the lack of moderation, content moderation, and, the people that he's constantly amplifying, they're like these far right influencers or journalists, he's gradually alienating more and more people. Now, the one big limitation on Threads right now is that you literally in the EU cannot even create an account. And, I hear that all the time from people. on Twitter where there's been a few different occasions where I've posted a link to my Threads page and kind of said, hey, be sure to follow me over here. I'm posting a lot on Threads. And I'll get replies from people that are like, I literally cannot create an account, here in Europe. And that, because and there are a lot of Europeans who are interested in U.S. politics for kind of obvious reasons. It's fascinating, kind of a dark manner right now, but it's fascinating nonetheless. And so hopefully they kind of, figure that out. I feel like that's kind of a big cap on just the user base. But, it really seems like Threads is making the most concerted push to, kind of be a place for people who feel alienated by the direction that Twitter is headed in or alienated by Elon's stewardship of it. And I just think with the resources they have behind it, the huge behemoth that is Meta, I don't see it going anywhere. If anything, I think it'll just kind of grow and grow. And I've already been really impressed, like I touched upon earlier, with the engagement there. I don't think Twitter's going to go away. I just think that it seems like, I've noticed this even in the quality of interactions there, that it's becoming very antagonistic. People on the right feel very emboldened. And I just think that's going to gradually alienate people. Like for me, there's such a large chunk of my audience still on Twitter that I can't really take that sort of principled stand of like, I'm done with Twitter, because that would be devastating for my business if I stopped posting on Twitter at this point. But there might be a tipping point, somewhere down the line where it'll make more sense for me to spend more time on Threads and less on Twitter. I don't think we're necessarily even that far away from that. But I don't think Twitter will be gone. I mean, I think it'll still exist, but I would not be surprised in 3 years from now if Threads is kind of the dominant product and the one that people like us here in this seminar are spending most of our time on.
Yeah, that's a believable take. I could see that future. I can see the future in which Threads just keeps on going. They seem committed to the arc. I don't think this is a flash in the pan or a project of the month or something like that. I think that they seem to be going at it in a real intentional manner. You'd mentioned earlier, right, this expansion of the team and how you've become more of a publisher. Have you thought about other areas of coverage? Are there other areas of focus that you could see expanding into? Celebrity news, tech news. No, I'm kidding.
Well, in terms of my own personal interest, I mean, it'd probably have to be some sort of like sports related news, because that's kind of my main decompression hobby in terms of things that I follow that are somewhat newsworthy. I really haven't, because this next year is going to be so, there's going to be so much political news. I have kind of reflected in my, just to myself about like what it would mean if Trump won again, and like how hard it would be to kind of get psyched up to do this again, if he's back in the White House. It feels like everything that needs to be said about him has been said in a way already. But I'll cross that bridge if I get there. And I think it's unlikely that he ends up winning. I don't really know. I mean, that is kind of a good question. I mean, I noticed Judd Legum, who a lot of people probably, if you follow me, you probably are familiar with him. He used to be my boss actually at Think Progress. And he does a really great newsletter called Popular Information that's like investigative accountability journalism, I guess is how I would describe what he does. But he recently launched a new newsletter that he's doing on like fitness. And he's into some kind of like esoteric fitness practices that he's now doing like a whole separate newsletter on. And so, that kind of piqued my interest. Is like, I guess that's a way to kind of branch out, not necessarily discontinue the thing that you're working on, but kind of pursue a new passion or something entirely different. So I could see something along those lines. I wouldn't be writing about fitness, I don't think. But, for now, like I said, I mean, I'm only kind of looking at this a year at a time. And, but it does become complicated in the sense that, I have most of my subscribers are yearly subscribers. And so there would have to be kind of like a wind down option if I ever really wanted to go that route, which I haven't seriously entertained. But it does become more complicated than like quitting your job, because you do have an obligation to people who are subscribing to get your content. And so, you could refund them. There'd be ways to do that. But, whenever my mind kind of goes down that road, which it hasn't gone very far down that road, but there are kind of immediately some factors that would make it difficult. But like I said, I mean, this next year for political news, the type of stuff I do is going to be, it's going to be such a news saturated environment with so many opportunities to do video work, to do writing for the newsletter, that everything else kind of beyond that, I'll sort as it draws near. But it even the election, which is now less than a year from now, feels very far away still.
Artificial intelligence, that's something that really wasn't. The LLMs, the large language models, were not a thing when we met in Los Angeles. So I'm curious, is that something you've kicked the tires on in terms of like being a tool for your research, being a tool for your writing,
Well,
for any of
this
the
is
work
kind of
that you
funny.
do?
It's funny that you mentioned that because I posted a tweet last week kind of mocking Elon. He's been really pushing this Grok.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if it's Grok. I assume it's pronounced Grok, but I could be completely
it
wrong on
is.
that.
It
But
is. No, it's Grok.
okay, yeah.
It's Grok. Yeah.
And then he yesterday posted kind of an example of what this tool is capable of, which I thought was actually quite impressive because the prompt that was entered was something like, "Tell me about the elections that are happening in the United States tonight." And
Yeah.
the AI not only spit out like kind of factual information, but even had some commentary that was like, "Oh, pundit X had this to say about this referendum in Ohio," and then it synthesized a lot of different information in a way that was almost like it was almost like a blog post, but if you didn't know better, just kind of reading this, you would think that like a human wrote it. So I was pretty impressed with that. To the extent that it's a representative example of what the goal is of this AI system that Elon is championing. I mean, I think that's pretty impressive. I haven't in my own work really thought too much about it. I mean, I know SnapStream, and I haven't really experimented too much with what you guys have with the AI generated clipping, which I could see that being really useful if I'm just directly quoting someone, for instance. If you're posting a clip from a congressional hearing of a soundbite and you want to have an extended quote, and AI could get good enough to do that in an accurate way, that would be amazing. Because, like, for instance, the transcripts that are available right now, not only in SnapStream but in other video services, are not generally very accurate. Where you can copy and paste them, but then you still have to listen back and make sure that the grammar is correct, that words aren't being omitted, all that those sorts of things.
Sure.
So that's kind of a low hanging fruit where I could see AI being useful for me in an environment like that. But beyond that, in terms of research, I mean, I'm open to that. I wouldn't say that that's not something that I'm interested in, but I'm not enough of an expert on AI in and of itself to know what that would look like for me. But I mean, it does seem to be an area where there are new developments every single week, and things are evolving very rapidly. So you might have a better sense, than I do in terms of even with SnapStream, how you guys are thinking of integrating that into what you do.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have AI clipping today, but it's something that we're working on. We have a really minimal AI feature today that'll generate the tweet text based on the thing that you clipped, and we'll summarize the transcript. And it's integrated. You just push this button, and it'll write the tweet for you. We did that, in a short amount of time a while ago, just as an experiment. But I think Brennan called it the Aaron Rupar button, where you just like press the button and it finds the clip for you, that the important clip. That's, I think, a promise that we want to fulfill, one way or the other. So we have some experiments going on internally around that, where clipping goes. But I think there are a lot of places where ChatGPT can be used for writing. Anybody that's in the writing business, I think, whether it's for marketing, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's politics or anything else, there's some pretty amazing things. And that's OpenAI, who makes ChatGPT, had a big product announcement earlier this week, and they just the bar keeps getting raised in terms of the capabilities that these things have, in terms of freshness of information, in terms of hallucinations and limiting those, and being able to feed the chat bots with different initial conditions, which make them kind of behave slightly differently. I haven't even really absorbed everything that was announced at the OpenAI thing earlier this week. So and it was a big one from what I can tell. So
wow.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right that it's like moving really fast, but I think it's probably most relevant to today in this moment to any kind of writing function. Super interesting.
Yeah, I'd be upset with one of my contributors if I found out that they were using AI to write their articles. But no, I mean, I'm familiar enough with their styles of writing where I'm not sincerely concerned about that. But yeah, I mean, that is kind of it's an interesting Pandora's box, because you can even I used to be, back in many moons ago, I was a teaching assistant for philosophy classes at the U of M, and the chicanery that you would encounter of how students would try to get these papers done, or plagiarizing Wikipedia, that sort of thing. And I could certainly see, in that context, how AI would be problematic in the sense that I could see it kind of churning out term papers and things like that, which doesn't seem ideal. You want people to actually have an ability to write, although maybe we'll get to a point where, like so many other functions that have been, like doing long division, who needs to really do that anymore? I mean, you can just do, the calculator can just do it for you. I mean, maybe we'll get to a point with writing where it's like, well, I can just have AI write this email for me, sort of thing. I mean, I can certainly see like in a context like writing kind of routine emails, just to kind of offload work like that. But I'll probably be the last one to figure that out because it isn't an area, and maybe this is a failure on my own part. Like, I haven't been super plugged in on what's going on there. I only really encountered this thing with Grok because paying the attention that I do to Elon, I was curious, and I will say, just yesterday he was posting this that I was impressed with what this AI system seems to be capable of. So
yeah,
yeah,
no, yeah. By the way, Grok is a product from a company that he founded to kind of be a competitor to OpenAI and ChatGPT, right? Which you probably know that, but like so I've been following all the Grok stuff as well. Yeah, that's great. So what was the other question I wanted to? So AI, we talked about that. Other areas. Let's see if we have any questions. I think there's some questions.
From
Brennan
Baker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you getting video into SnapStream via cable boxes, or do you have another source for news video that you're able to get into SnapStream? Just kind of general question about how video works with SnapStream.
Yeah, and I'll tag on to this question, Aaron.
sure.
I'm curious if your sources, the places you're getting video from, have changed at all beyond, the usual suspects of broadcast television.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've gotten a lot more immersed in like YouTube streams. For instance, with even today, there was a House Judiciary Committee hearing that I don't believe was carried by any of the C-SPANs, and so I had to go to the House Judiciary YouTube page. And then in that case, SnapStream does have a capability of ingesting a stream like that you can clip. But as Brennan can attest, that I oftentimes have to ping either him or Graham, kind of like, hey, can you guys set up a stream? Because it's kind of a cumbersome. You need
Sure.
It's a very multi-pronged process to do
Totally.
this.
Yeah,
That'd be something down the line that would actually be amazing if it was easier to do that. Because like for instance, with this hearing today, there was one clip that I wanted, and I had to use a screen recorder, which is like the prehistoric times of how videos are cut and then posted. But I'll do it if I have to. So yeah, I mean, YouTube streams, any sort of like Facebook live streams for hyper local stuff. Like sometimes city council meetings, if there's one of interest, it'll be like on a Facebook stream, maybe even a little less so than a couple of years ago. I think most of that stuff lives on YouTube now. And then, beyond that, I use one other product pretty regularly called Grabian, which has like a multi-viewer, and they get like Steve Bannon's podcast is something that they offer, and you can clip it in there. It's definitely not as smooth as SnapStream in terms of clipping, but that's a way that I like keep tabs on Steve Bannon, or they'll carry some of the like DeSantis speeches on the campaign trail sort of thing. So it's kind of it's sort of an all of the above approach. That is one amazing thing about spending a lot of time on the internet these days, is that if there's a major event happening in politics or really in anything else, you can almost certainly find a stream of it somewhere. And if you can find a stream of it, there's ways to get video that you can use on social media or use in a Substack newsletter. One thing actually is a little bit of a sidebar here that was really annoying that Elon did in one of his fits of peak was he got rid of the capability of embedding tweets in Substack articles. And so I have to use like an extra step. Like if there's a clip I want to use in a newsletter, I use my YouTube page now for that. We'll put it on YouTube, and then you can embed the YouTube. So that's gotten a little bit more cumbersome, because it used to be really easy just to paste a tweet with the video and then people could watch the video. But yeah, I mean, there's so many different sources for video. And that's one of the great things actually about SnapStream is that, there's already ways to get all of it into SnapStream if you know what you're doing more than I do. But, even if you don't, it seems like that's going to be, something that's not too far beyond the horizon in terms of being able to use YouTube streams, get it into SnapStream, and then clip it with transcripts and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question to wrap up here that I asked you last time as well, which is what makes a good viral clip? I'm curious if the answer has changed at all. How would you describe the process of watching a long form video and then saying, that's gonna be successful, that's gonna get reach?
I think I'm going to say the same thing I said last time, which is that it's more of an art than a science for sure. I think you always want to err on the side of brevity, in the sense that usually the really good part of the clip is going to be like 30 seconds to 45 seconds. You don't want to necessarily post, like, some people want to err on the side of adding more context. They'll post like a 2-minute clip. It just gets to be too much for people to watch. Now, there's kind of different ways of approaching this, because the way that I approach posting clips, like tonight with the debate, I'm more going for kind of totality because I'm doing a big thread. So if there are moments that stand out, I want them to be part of the thread. I'm watching it live, so you don't necessarily know. There might be like a really good 30 seconds, but then something even more compelling might happen 15 seconds later. I'm usually going to err on the side of just getting the clip up, and then if I do 2 clips, I'll do that. Whereas someone like Asen, who's another brand ambassador for SnapStream, who people are, I'm sure, familiar with if you're in this seminar, I think he aims more for getting like the one clip, like the perfect clip that will be kind of the definitive. And there are times where I aim for that, but especially if I'm covering something live, you just don't know what's going to happen in the next 30 seconds after you hit post on that clip, and so. But I guess as a general rule, again, like the shorter, the better, without being misleading or like shortening things of context that is relevant to what's being said in a clip. There's kind of, you can either go for like the direct quote, but this is kind of an unfortunate reality of social media. Usually the ones that are going to go more viral are when you have a caption that's kind of like, wow, this was an amazing thing that just happened, or wow, Jim Jordan just got owned, and then you post that, and then people will watch it more. Whereas if you have just a direct quote, it's not quite as sexy, I don't think. So anyway, I mean, I wish I had all the answers for that, because then I would post nothing but viral clips. But I probably post 15 to 20 clips a day, and maybe one will go viral. And sometimes I'm surprised, when they do, or it's like, I didn't think that was that great of a clip, but so you never really know. But again, like the one general rule I would kind of tell people is that err on the side of being shorter than longer, because people have very short attention spans. And beyond that, if you learn the secret to it, let me know, because I'm curious as well.
Hey man, thanks again for joining in this conversation. It's been great to talk to you and check in over the last year, and I think you're an inspiration to a lot of other independent journalists and writers. You've built this really great enterprise, and you do it pretty casually. I think that's the other cool thing about it, is like you've maintained your agency, and you seem to enjoy it. So kudos.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, great catching up, Rakesh, and I appreciate it. That's very kind of you to say. I feel very grateful to have the audience, the platform that I do, and so I'm always mindful of that. And like tonight, there's a Timberwolves game I really want to go to, and I have tickets for, but I'm watching the debate because like I want to make sure that I'm delivering for my readers, that that they expect me to be watching and covering this. And so, but I'm feel very blessed to be able to do this for a living, and you guys have played a huge part in it. So it's great catching up, and maybe next time, we kind of got into career stuff today, and it's great to talk through all that, but I'd love to do this again and talk more about video clipping specifically, and
Cool.
more SnapStream stuff, so maybe we can do that down the line.
All right, man. Thanks.
Love it.
See ya.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.